right, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this online session on the European Green Deal at the TEPSA conference on the eve of the Slovenian EU presidency that starts on the 1st of July. My name is Louise van Schaik and I'm the head of the EU and Global Affairs Unit and coordinator of the research on climate change at the Clingendael Institute in the Netherlands, a TEPSA member, and I will moderate this event. Today, we will be discussing how the European economy can recover from COVID-19 and prioritize the green transition at the same time. We already heard some things about this morning. We will do this with an excellent panel of speakers that can reflect on the issues that are expected soon to be on the Council agenda. Observers no longer refer to the European Green Deal as a distant dream. Since the von der Leyen Commission entered office, the twin challenges of climate change and digital stand at the heart of EU policymaking, and they remained there during the COVID-19 crisis and the debates on the recovery of the economic downfall caused by the crisis. Mid-July, the European Commission is expected to table the Fit for 55 package, that is to translate the EU's political climate change commitments to reduce its emissions by at least 55% in 2030 into operational policies and legally binding legislation. Since the current policy framework is only amounting to a 40% emission reduction, this is very ambitious. We will see how the EU emissions trading scheme for heavy industry will be sharpened and if new sectors will be added to emissions trading. We will also see what will be the division of effort sharing targets for the other sectors as distributed among the EU member states, and if they consider the Commission proposal in this respect a fair one. And we will also become to know the shape of the proposal for a carbon border adjustment measure, a levy on carbon heavy imports at the EU border produced in countries with less ambitious climate change policies. And how will the EU intend to mitigate potential social consequences of these ambitious policies that may disproportionately affect specific regions or sectors? How will it ensure that the transition will be just? The package is expected to affect many policy areas, and it is to be realized that the transition to eventually arrive at a climate neutral economy by 2050 will also require a lot of changes to national policies and investments. Therefore, the Green Agenda needs to stay at the heart of the COVID recovery investments and is now also stretching out to the enlargement and neighborhood countries. In fact, in the run-up to COP26, climate diplomacy efforts towards all the EU international partners are accelerated. And in January, an elaborate set of Council conclusions on the external dimension of the Green Deal were adopted, and these should now also be transferred into action. In short, there is an incredible lot to discuss with regard to the Green Deal, and the second half of 2021, when Slovenia will be at the EU's helm, will be exciting times for the EU's climate ambitions at home and for its international standing. To grasp better what is at stake and what can be expected, we could not have a better lineup of speakers. I would like to ask you please to give a virtual round of applause to Raffaele Amaro Perticcione, the Director General of the Director General for Climate Action of the European Commission, Dr. Janis Potocnek, Systemic Partner and the co-chair of the United Nations International Resource Panel, and also the former European Commissioner for Science and Research, and before that the Commissioner for Environment. Dr. Simona Borghese, the director of the Florence School of Regulation, part-time professor at the European University Institute, and also professor in Siena, Italy. And Ms. Ladia Godina-Kosier, the founder and director of Circular Change, Slovenia, and the chair of the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Forum. So with her, we're going to discuss a bit more the bottom-up processes and the engagement of civil society and key stakeholders in this field. This webinar is broadcasted live via Zoom and via YouTube, and I would like to welcome all participants here. Thank you for your interest in this event. If you have joined via Zoom, and if you have questions or comments, you can use them by typing in your questions into the chat. And I think also the Q&A function is open. And we even have a Q&A moderator, Daniel, who is helping me with looking into the questions and seeing which one we should address and also to whom. Well, without further ado, and I do hope that you have also a lot of questions, I would like to move to the first panelists, Raffaele Mauro Petriccione, the Director General of DG Clima, with a long and distinguished career in the European Commission, previously also, for instance, the lead on the EU's trade policy. Mr. Petriccione, I wanted to ask, could you please share with us if in the history of the EU you have seen similar efforts like the European Green Deal, and in what way the current efforts to achieve the Green Deal are different or similar? And what can we also learn from the EU if it's embarking on such a grand projet, as they say in French? Is this what the EU is made for? Or is it rather a challenging undertaking for the EU as a political construct?
Well, thank you very much, Louise, and very grateful for the invitation to this event. We're looking forward to the Slovenian presidency. We're going to give them a difficult task, and we're going to keep them very busy. So I'm very happy at least to be able to participate a bit in setting it up. I hope I'm not exaggerating if I say that this is of the caliber of the founding project of the Union. If you look at why we were born, we created a single market as the recipe to overcome centuries of conflicts. And we've been extraordinarily successful at that. It's been difficult, it's been complicated, it's not always been pretty, but we have succeeded. We have brought peace to the European continent after centuries of conflicts. It's been a huge transformation. I mean, it has happened very quietly, but it has been fundamental. What we are looking at here is an equally fundamental transformation of our entire life, our entire economy, our entire society. Climate change is a threat, and it's going to hit us more and more very fast. And we have created this threat through the way we have set up our economy. If we don't change that, we will not stop the threat. But at the same time, this is not a policy of sacrifice. This is not stop doing wrong to save yourselves, and in the meantime, renounce your other objectives. It has to be a different way to achieve all our objectives, which are, peace and prosperity, if you want a short formula. And that's what we're trying to do. So it is fundamental. It's not one big challenge more. So is this what the EU is made for? But in a way, I'm not sure this is what the EU is made for, but this is the kind of challenge that we have faced as Europeans collectively. And I think we have the ability and the interest in doing it again. Challenging, very challenging. But challenges are are not necessarily a bad thing. Challenges always bring opportunities. We have the intelligence and the resources to seize those opportunities. Whether we will or not, I'm optimist. I think we will, but it will not happen overnight.
Mm-hmm. All right. So this is truly is, the big grand project of today, and it's also something the EU has to face with and has to tackle. What do you tell, if I may ask, to citizens in the EU who are perhaps still skeptical about the European Green Deal? For instance, because they fear electricity prices will rise or they will lose their job in specific sectors that are hit hard by the energy transition. And what do you give as an answer to those that point out that the EU in relative terms is not a very big emitter with less than 10% of global emissions? So why should we put all these efforts up and lead in this agenda, if you like?
I mean, first of all, I would make a distinction between being skeptical and having concerns. I mean, the people have concerns, they ask pointed questions, that they want precise answers. What's going to happen to me, to my family, to my job? What about my mobility? What about my house? What about the future of my kids? Will they find jobs? We've been in this business for generations. Why change? And none of this is in itself skepticism. This is healthy questioning. We are in a democracy, and if people weren't asking this question, I would be very worried. At the same time, there is a form of Europe. There's something uniquely European in this. We're the only place in the world where you have 90+% of Europeans telling you climate change is real, climate change is a huge problem, I want my government to fix it. Nowhere else in the world you have these numbers. If you break it down, the smallest majority that we have in a member state is above 60%. So nowhere in Europe, less than 2/3 of people think that this is an issue and that we have a job in fixing that issue. We, I mean, collectively, administrators, decision makers, politicians, both at the EU level and at the national and the local level. So there's something unique in that respect. The question now has to be, how do we build on this? How do we build on this wealth of consensus to create the right instrument? I mean, first of all, as I was saying earlier, this cannot be a policy of sacrifice. This has to be a policy of changing the way we pursue our objective, which remains those of a modern economy capable of creating wealth and jobs and a prosperous society. If we can use this also to make it into a more equitable society, into a fairer society, you know, every big, we're talking about challenges earlier, you know, every big transformation disrupts the existing order. Well, the existing order isn't perfect, is it? So if we use the opportunity of this huge transformation to also address some of the ills that we have already, this is the time to do it. And just to be practical, you asked about electricity prices. Well, electricity prices are high in Europe, in many places. Energy poverty is an issue. We have about 37 million Europeans who can't pay their bills and need some sort of support. So it's not the transformation that's going to cause that. And the question is not only can we avoid adding to it, which we can. The question is, can we use the opportunity of transformation not only to avoid creating more energy poverty, but to fix the problem we already have? In the longer term, the energy forms that we are developing, renewable energy, huge efforts in energy savings and energy efficiency, will make things better for everybody. So the real question, how do we handle the transition? How do we find the mechanism, the resources? Just to give again a practical example, we are putting on the table the idea of carbon pricing for heating and cooling of the building sector. It's very clear to the Commission that this proposal should not be made if it is not accompanied by robust proposals on how to address two big problems. The great majority of Europeans who could afford to invest in renovating the built environment but don't have credit standing, they're too small, they're individuals, they have a good salary, but they're not rich. And how do we support those who can't afford this renovation? So we have to translate these grand objectives into very practical instruments on how we help people. The global angle, well, we are ideally places to start. We have the consensus, we have the resources, and even more so through the Next Generation EU package. We have the legislation, the regulation. We are not inventing things. We are enhancing what we have already built. We have a long history, a successful history of starting this transformation already decades ago. If we don't start, who does? And if nobody starts, climate change is around the corner. This is not an issue where you can hide and say, well, let's see whether somebody else fixes the problem. If it doesn't fix the problem, I'll go somewhere else and save myself. You can't save yourself from climate change. It's going to come after you, wherever you are. And Europe is a lot more fragile than other ecosystems in the world because of our very peculiar geographical position. So we need to start this process. Advocacy and moral leadership is not enough. What we need to do, and we can do it, is to offer others a model, a working model of how do you build a decarbonized, clean economy while keeping it modern, competitive, creating wealth and jobs, and leading to a prosperous society. At the end of the day, again, telling developing countries, don't develop because it's bad for the planet. It's not a very credible proposition, is it? We can offer a model. And frankly, if we fail in offering that model and others don't follow us, well, we'll suffer along everybody else.
All right, thank you so much. I very much liked several things that you said. I think it's important, this notion of offering a model. I also think it's important, this emphasis on that the Green Deal cannot be a policy of sacrifice, and that the energy poverty and high electricity prices are not only related to the transition, but we're already there. I think these are, for instance, very interesting notions. And I also saw that already the first questions come in the chat. But before we go there, we will first go to the other panelists, and I still had a question to you, which is with regards to the Fit for 55 package, because we know that two important pieces of legislation, or maybe there are even more, but the topics in any case will be the revision of the emissions trading scheme and also a proposal for a carbon border adjustment mechanism. Of course, I realize that you cannot go into the details of these proposals. They have also not been adopted yet in the College of Commissioners, and they are expected to be tabled mid-July. But can you already give us some thoughts about what do you expect is going to be the most difficult for the Slovenian presidency to handle with regards to this package in the second half of 2021?
We actually started this discussion with our Slovenian colleagues. I think the most important thing that this presidency can do is to make sure that the package is understood. The entire package, not just in the individual parts. The individual parts, what exactly are we proposing and why, and how they fit together, and why it's difficult to do something different if we really want to achieve our objective. Because this is, at one level, as I said, this is not radically new. There are things that we know. We are reforming existing legislation. At the same time, the change in targets makes a huge qualitative jump in how this legislation affects people's lives, their economic activity, and everybody has to understand, and the co-legislators, first of all, have to understand why this package and not a different one. And this is not going to be easy. It's not going to happen in a matter of weeks, and it's not going to happen through a handful of meetings in the council. So I think this presidency has a tall order in terms of creating the conditions for them starting to bring the package together at the political level. And what we would like the Slovenian president to do is to be the conduit for the questions that you were asking at the beginning. To be those who condense, bring together, and give order to the fact that people will have a lot of questions. Those questions are all perfectly legitimate, whether you agree with the spirit in which they ask or not. This is also a gigantic exercise in democracy. If you recall what we did for the long-term strategy, our objective for 2050, we spent a year touring Europe, fostering national discussion in national parliament, in cities, in regions, in citizen organization. It was a huge exercise in democracy. And when our leaders endorsed the objective of net zero in 2050, did so on the basis of a very strong domestic consensus. We're still surfing on the wave of that consensus. Now we are delivering the practical instruments. Well, we need that kind of discussion. We need that kind of building consensus not only on what we want to achieve, but these are the right instruments to achieve. The 6 months of the Slovenian presidency won't be too long to achieve that. Then the proposal you quoted, yes, you've quoted two of the more controversial. Not so much the revision of the ETS, which I think is going to be welcomed by investors, by industry, because it gives them long-term stability. But if we propose carbon pricing for new sectors like road transport and heating and cooling of fuels for building, that go straight to the final consumer and the household, the questions are going to be a lot more pointed. And border adjustment, well, the whole world is suspicious that this is yet another example of Fortress Europe and another trick by the Europeans to keep competitive products out. The reality is we are changing our economy. We are convinced that we will make it more competitive in the longer term. In the short term, we're not going to see Europe deindustrialized because we're asking our people to make a bigger effort than everybody else in the world. The rest of the world isn't prepared to make the same effort at the same time. We have at least the right to support our industry, different ways, different instruments, and the border adjustment will be one of those. We want green steel, but in that expression, there is also we want to keep steel in Europe. I come from a steel town. The worst environmental disaster of Europe in the past couple of decades. We still want that steel. We want it greener than it has been. We want it green. If we need to shield our industry to an extent while they transform, we will do it.
Right, thank you so much. Very interesting points raised, and also a very clear language on the reasons behind CBAM and why it's crucial to still go ahead with it, despite indeed the rest of the world being critical. Yeah, but much appreciated, very much appreciated your insights to this discussion, and I think there will be certainly some questions also posed to you. So thank you so much, and we'll get back to you in a short while. Now we will move to Janis Potocnek, the former Slovenian commissioner, or commissioners, of course, always a European commissioner, but from Slovenia. For environment and for research, and this is actually I should actually also mention that Mr. Potocnek has to leave us at 1:45 because he is also the chair of the resource panel of the UN, and he has to deliver a keynote address at the another conference on the EU's raw materials initiatives to secure all these rare earths that we also need for the energy transition. But Mr. Potocnek, we're extremely pleased that you were able to join us today. Looking back, but also looking forward, so the EU clearly seems to be very ambitious in its green agenda, and also to consider in earnest the social impacts of the energy transition. We already heard Mr. Petruccione talk about the challenge of energy poverty and energy access, but also the just transition element. But can we really do this? Can such an ambitious project be implemented? And where do you see the connection between the European Green Deal and this COVID-19 recovery phase that we are hopefully now entering? I received my vaccination earlier this week. Please, Mr. Potocnek.
Thank you, Louise, and a good question. Many are saying that the world after COVID will not be the same again, but unfortunately, it will be very much the same. We will hopefully just better understand it. It is likely that, for example, the frequency and severity of health-related outbreaks, climate-related extreme weather events will still increase in the future. So we need to rethink the way we are managing the risks as individuals, collectively, as private companies, public policymakers, locally, globally. Our individual and collective responsibility has enormously increased, and we need to collaborate more, build resilient societies, be better prepared. And we need to be prepared also to share our national sovereignty to protect our collective future. Needless to say that European Union, despite all the problems we are facing, it's still best example, which we can all learn from a lot. But I actually see 5 reasons why European Green Deal and post-COVID recovery are basically 2 sides of the same coin. First, the economic policy, which was designed by European Green Deal and related documents is, I think, the most convincing competitiveness policy for the European Union. According to raw materials scoreboard from the Commission, the EU was in 2018 between 75 and 100% reliant on imports of most metals, and more than half of European Union's energy needs are met by net imports. Prices of raw materials are extremely volatile, recently also growing, and resources constitute the largest share of industry input cost. So it makes all the sense to focus there. Second, European Green Deal already provides convincing answers to some COVID-19 related concerns in relation to reconsidering globalization effects. Building a clean circular economy promises to reduce our dependence on imported materials, lower our environmental, climate and health impacts, and of course also create more local jobs. It can also help improve self-sufficiency and resilience exposed by COVID-19 in relation to the global supply chains. Third, both European Green Deal and post-COVID-19 call for an intergenerational solidarity, a kind of agreement. In the past decades, GDP has grown at the expense of depleting natural capital, passing on the costs of replenishing this capital to future generations. The billions in financial debt being mobilized by countries and institutions to combat COVID-19 are also adding to this environmental debt. At minimum, we should provide them with a safer, more sustainable, resilient future. Fourth, COVID-19 is providing the necessary missing urgency to the European Green Deal and climate-related financial efforts. We have seen that determined global actions in facing a crisis are possible if the crisis is perceived as imminent. Until now, the fight against environmental challenges has never been seen as sufficiently urgent to attract enough funding. And funds committed to COVID-19 recovery in EU, we have almost doubled budget capacity now, create definitely an opportunity to reshape an economy in a transitional scale way. So, and finally, I think that both COVID-19 and European Green Deal are also require changes and a new approach to the governance, in particular on a global level. So that's the cooperation which I was talking about before.
Right, thank you. Yeah, that's also a very valid comment. And also, how do we do that at the international level with a kind of playing field that increasingly sees assertive great powers and geopolitical competition, whereas at the same time you still have to address these joint challenges. I wanted to go a little bit deeper. Do you also see any lessons that we can learn from the COVID-19 management and what we can learn from that for other crises? And how optimistic are you that the lessons learned will be well integrated in the management of the climate crisis and also the implementation of the European Green Deal? So what can we take from the past 1.5 years?
Yes, Louise, the management of the COVID crisis, I think it's an excellent lesson and also a good proxy, if you want. We have to look at, to learn and address the shortcomings we see. What should somehow make us worry? Let me try to answer the question by drawing the analogy between COVID crisis management I will address in the moment and also environmental, in particular climate crisis management. First, we have not really listened well to the scientific warnings and prepared ourselves appropriately, since we have underestimated the probability and likelihood pandemics would happen, as well as the extent of the potential severity. Second, we have not been able to act sufficiently together, coordinate well our efforts, at least at the beginning, practically on any level, despite the severe impacts and clear global threat for the humanity. Third, we have not been able to manage the crisis following only the most obvious ethical goals, saving human lives, which would be in our case, climate crisis. The strategy chosen practically in all the countries were not clear and were frequently changing following compromise between health and other interests, in particular short-term economic interests. And fourth, while substantial support was provided to many, this is still not changing the fact that most vulnerable were hit most, and solidarity, in particular towards low-income countries, has failed. Signals coming from the recent G7 meeting are encouraging, and let's hope they will indeed materialize. The real positive part, I think, it's related to scientific efforts and the amount of funding and financial resources invested in finding solutions related to vaccine and also to other medicines. But even here, if we are frank, one can draw the worrying analogy that we are rather focusing here on consequences than really showing the readiness to address the real causes of the problem. And we know well that relieving the pain without curing the disease and addressing the reasons leading to it has always a very limited effect. So this is a kind of a worrying pattern which we have to avoid in the management of the climate crisis or in any other global environmental related crisis. While COVID crisis hopefully has the prospects to be under control in a decent limited time, there is unfortunately not so clear prospect when climate crisis is in question. European Green Deal definitely gives us real hope, and I agree here with Mauro. Vision is clear, so are the targets, but to make the implementation truly possible, I think it would still need to better address the drivers and pressures that cause environmental damage and related problems, provide more systemic perspective to guide decision-making, and of course integrate well the COVID-related recovery activities, which I have mentioned already in the first reply.
Right, thank you so much. Yes, by some people, also the climate crisis has been considered kind of the COVID crisis in slow motion, huh? Because we see it coming, we know it's there. So in a way, we have also a bit more abilities to prepare and to act, which we are doing with the European Green Deal. But yeah, I think I see where you're coming from. So how do you then view the great transformation of our economy that the EU is now embarking upon with the European Green Deal? Do you think it will be possible to shift fully to becoming climate neutral, and hopefully also to become perhaps fully circular by 2050? So with another speaker of this panel later on, we will go a bit deeper on this idea of a circular economy, resource efficiency. I think these were plans that you were still working on as a commissioner. And can we do this without compromising our currently luxurious lifestyle and consumption patterns in the EU? Because we've heard from Mr. Petriccione that we cannot have a policy of sacrifice, but is this really possible in the European context?
Mm-hmm. As explained already by Mauro, the challenge is indeed serious, but it's in the first place how to meet our needs in a different way, not how to reduce the needs. It is difficult to imagine that our societies and economies without the essential role of market economies and markets. So signals sent to market players are essential for our behavior, for the behavior of both producers and consumers. Unfortunately, signals sent to market players are sometimes, if not many times, in contradiction with the public interest and challenges we are facing and have to collectively solve. So we need a real system change transformation. We need to address some of the essentials leading to the potential catastrophic developments. An important part of that behavior riddle guiding the development of human well-being in the right direction are exactly the market signals to producers and consumers. So we should stop giving the producers signals that destroying natural capital is free of charge. And we should stop confusing the consumers, asking them to behave responsibly on one hand, but requesting them on the other hand to pay more if they do so. So I would be the first claiming that nature has intrinsic value we have to respect and protect, that we have to value it, and that pricing is quite a perverse way of doing that. But until, as nicely put it by Professor Stiglitz, invisible hand will often be invisible since it is often not there. There it's in the very words of famous Finnish author Arto Pasilina, a charming mass suicide orchestrated by the invisible hand of markets. So acknowledging the value of natural capital by markets would almost inevitably, at least in foreseeable future, lead to some cost and price increases and worsen the already unenviable social situation. This would be hard to accept by many, living already on the edge, which leads to the conclusion that environmental and social transformations are interconnected more than we are ready to acknowledge. And without simultaneously really addressing all the sustainable development goals spectrum, we have no real chance to succeed. So since labor capital is also undervalued and under-rewarded by markets, fixing both simultaneously, I think it's essential. Like you, Louise, have underlined in your opening and also Mauro after you. To get the market signals and related prices right, the deep political and cultural transformation is needed only through this holistic health check, only through the right diagnosis. One can start developing the right cure. We need to challenge ourselves. We need to revalue what really matters and regenerate the notion of true happiness. We need to rebuild the world around common good and rethink the way we are managing the risks. We need to accept our responsibility to govern the future we want, and what would be better moment than that of hard COVID crisis we are still facing and hard COVID lessons we are still learning from. Following the steps chartered by European Green Deal gives us a true hope. So let's prove that we humans are intelligent as we claim. I think it's high time for that. And maybe best it was summarized in the recent Dasgupta report that the two major challenges are actually, it would be most important to address the institutional failures on one hand and failure of contemporary economics, which is treating humans as external to nature instead of being part of nature.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Potocnek. This was truly elevating, a lot of food for thought. And I'm also sure that it will lead to more questions in the chat and issues people are keen to discuss. And we know that you have to leave at 1:45, but I'm sure that we will still be able to get back to you before that time. Now I would like to turn to our next speaker, Simona Borghese, who is the director of the Florence School of Regulation and also professor at the EUI and the University of Siena in Italy. Professor Borghese, you are an expert in the regulatory aspect of EU climate policy, and also you work a lot on how emissions trading schemes could be connected. You are even directing a specific project involving regulators of emissions trading schemes called Live DCET. Since the EU emissions trading scheme was established in 2003, that time I was working in Brussels and followed it closely, there has been a huge interest by other countries and regions to replicate it and to connect to it. But over time, I think it has proven difficult to achieve this in practice. Now countries are getting more serious with national emission reduction targets, and also the carbon price of the ETS is finally becoming a serious price. How do you see progress in this field, and what is still making it so hard to connect these different emissions trading schemes and to have, let's say, this European model for decarbonization copied, and then also with emissions trading or carbon pricing as the instrument? Professor Borghese.
Thank you, Louise. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's a real pleasure. And yes, your question goes to the heart of what we are doing at EUI with my team, and to the heart of the cornerstone, I would say, of the European climate policy, the EU ETS. As you were saying, the European emission trading scheme has been seen as the prototype for the others. It was the first transnational carbon market, the world's largest carbon market, at least until the Chinese one will come on board, probably the second half of this year. Now it has the highest carbon price. So in a way, I would say that it has been leading by example to the others. And this is also explains why this instrument has been extending elsewhere, both Western and Eastern, to many jurisdictions. We now have emission trading system covering around 14% of global house gases. Now, some of these ETSs start linking among themselves. Think of California and Quebec, or Europe and Switzerland more recently at the beginning of 2020. But the progress has been low, as you said, and it has been low for several reasons. First of all, I would say the risk that may come from a possible loss of sovereignty, of control on the system. And secondly, a loss of accountability that might derive from, let's say, getting married, so linking with another jurisdiction. And thirdly, the differences in the features of the various ETSs. So there are common aspects that make this system linkable. There are still some relevant differences. So what our project, the DCET project, tries to do is to inform the dialogue among the main emission trading system regulators that are involved in the project. And actually, Mauro knows this very well, and we are very glad to have the European Commission involved, but we also have California, China, Quebec, New Zealand, and Switzerland involved in the project, the regulators of this involved in our project. Our aim is basically to compare the different ETSs and inform this dialogue, as I said, and deepen the cooperation. Actually, the DCET, I pronounce it in the Latin way, DCET stands for Deepening International Cooperation on Emission Trading. And this cooperation, in my view, is particularly important. It can possibly lead to the harmonization of the ETSs. This is our goal. At the end of the day, linking would lead to price convergence, and as such, it would create a level playing field. However, we all know that linking takes time. It's a long run process that needs to build up trust and cooperation among the different regulators, the different systems. And what our project tries to do is to help this process. We want to provide background reports that may help building up this cooperation. And if I may say so, in this case, I think the travel is more important than the final destination. I mean, what we learn by traveling together, creating this trust and cooperation is more important than having the linking done by a certain time, because this cooperation goes beyond the emission trading system. It goes towards the cooperation among climate policies, among our jurisdictions, which is even more important in the end. So in this sense, we aim to contribute to this process.
All right, thank you. So what you're actually saying is that if you link, discuss linking ETS, you also do in a way capacity building of how such a system works and how it can be implemented in different political systems. And I guess also what you were saying is that the difficulty with sovereignty is that once you link ETS, then you're less able to adjust it. And if industry is having a hard time, to give them some more allowances, because then you would violate the rules of the link. That is also making it so difficult. So I wanted to ask you, because the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Measure, is sometimes also presented as a kind of mirror to ETS. The ETS sets the carbon price in the European market, and if these industry sectors would be located outside the EU, then they would have also a price, and this price they now have to pay if they want to enter the EU. What do you expect from the CBAM proposal, and and how it may impact the EU's international positioning as international standard setter? Do you expect it will lead to more interest in other regions to also set up emissions trading schemes, so to prove that they have their own carbon price? And may they also see it as a way to escape a CBAM? So, for instance, with the Western Balkans in the green agenda, there is now this intention to set up emissions trading and to link it to the EU, of course, as part of the enlargement. And these countries also have to implement all EU legislation, so also the ETS. And is it also really possible to have a WTO compatible CBAM, or do you expect that there will still be legal debates on this issue? Please.
Louise, that's a difficult question, but I'm happy to try and address and give you my personal view and feeling on this. The CBAM is certainly an important step, a courageous change in the climate negotiations. We have to recognize that the window of opportunity to reach the Paris Agreement target is closing. And so we need to accelerate in climate policies if we are to deliver the promised targets. So the ambition of the EU policies has grown tremendously and is growing remarkably over time. And our efforts might be useless if carbon leakage occurs and if the others don't follow. In the end, we are around 10% of global emissions. And obviously, if this simply creates a delocalization, then we will not achieve what we want to. So for this reason, it's so important to establish a level playing field. Linking, what I was referring to in my previous question, can be a way, the CBAM can be another. And I believe the principles of the CBAM are absolutely right. But we also know that the design is difficult. There are two main concerns, I think, that the others have. One is that it's protectionist, and the second, that it is unfair. Now, we need to send the others the right signal. We need to make it transparent, non-manipulable, so that there is a reduced fear of protectionism. We need to make it gradual, starting with specific sectors. We need to involve the stakeholders, and most of all, our trading partners, both bilaterally and multilaterally, to make sure so that they understand that it is not an unilateral decision, and we need to include exemptions for equally ambitious policies or diversification to account for different development levels. All this is very important because if it will be perceived as a trade measure, then we may end up with just retaliation policies and we run into WTO problems. So I believe we can expect to travel into troubled waters for a while. But after all, we need to do this important step. After all, others have planned to do similar steps, take similar measures in the past, or take, for instance, the California cap and trade. It includes similar measures for imports of electricity from Mexico and Canada. So my feeling is that it's a risky move if you want, but we should take it. We should accompany it with other measures because sometimes the carrot works better than the stick. But I also have the feeling that this threat is already working, is already doing the job, because if it is clearly explained, it may drive changes in the others. And I personally already see some signals of change in attitude in other jurisdictions and more attention and more willing to move towards carbon pricing and proper regulation in other jurisdictions. So I have, if you want, mixed feelings, but overall positive feelings.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I was just thinking that in the field of environmental policy, you always have this notion of the shadow of legislation. So if companies expect the government will come with regulation, they will start to act. And this is what we try to do with CBAM, but then with regard to other countries. And that's, of course, what has also been emphasized by Commissioner Timmermans and also his head of cabinet, Diederik Samsom, that they hope that it will not be necessary to actually have a CBAM because other countries will already start with a carbon price. But yeah, we cannot be sure. So clearly I'm from the Netherlands. You are actually from Italy. And we all know that Italy was hit extremely hard by the first COVID wave. And as a result, had to go into a very strict lockdown with a huge economic contraction. As also an economist, do you think that Italy will manage to recover and also to do so in a green way? So to go back a bit to the overarching theme of this session, please, Professor Borghese.
Yes, Louise. Indeed, Italy suffered a lot from the COVID pandemic. From any perspective, I would say the health, obviously, perspective, but also the social, the economic perspective have been really harshly hit. But personally, I'm confident on our capacity to recover for several reasons. First, let's say the past experience. We have seen that Italy recovering when touching the ground, so to speak, when reaching the minimum, we always manage to recover and recover quite fast, to be honest. Secondly, because I think Italy has the innovation capacity, particularly in some leading sectors at the international level, or at least we had it before COVID, but I'm confident we will have after as well. And thirdly, I have confidence, I would say, also in the political leadership right now. For once, the political context can be a plus, not a minus as it has sometimes been in the past. However, there are big challenges, there are some difficulties. Our recovery plan is very much on the green and digital side. These two pillars of the recovery plan are jointly around 70% of the overall plan. But I have to be honest, others have done even more. If you take the countries that receive less money, like Germany, Luxembourg, and Austria, they have around 90% on green and digital, according to a recent study by Bruegel. So it will be green, definitely, it can have a large impact on our capacity to recover. According to recent estimates that I've saw, the cumulative effects of Next Generation EU on the Italian real GDP is expected to be around 14% over the period up to 27. And it will be the 6th country in the ranking of largest impact. There are also some possible shortcomings, in my view, in the present recovery plan. There are large investments in major infrastructure projects, which is great, but we have to take care of avoiding possible mistakes, like rainfall funds, so to speak. We could do more on some aspects, like the sustainable mobility, which is one of the key sectors. Transport accounts for around 30% of Italian emissions. And I think there is too little still on electric vehicle diffusion. There is too little on congestion charges, which worked in the past and are needed also to change the citizens' behaviors. There are sometimes some conflicting signals, like the authorization to exploit fossil fuel fields in some regions or offshore. And on circular economy, since I know we will be talking about this, I think there is quite a lot, but there is a lot on waste policy. But circular economy is not only that. I think we should do more on incentivizing product and process innovations. And I think innovation is what is needed to gain again a comparative advantage and set us back on a sustainable path, because innovation is key to growth, and this goes hand in hand with education, where you need human capital investments, and we lost, I think, in this long lockdown, especially due to the absence from school of our kids for quite some time. And the innovation goes hand in hand with education, but also with health, because we, I think, pay the price also of lower investments in health pre-COVID. So again, going back to what was said by the previous panelists, there are lessons to be learned also for our country, but I'm confident that we learned these lessons, and I'm confident we managed to do a good job, because the recovery plan that was set up can be improved, but it's a very good basis.
All right, thank you. And also already for making the link with the circular economy and with innovation, because that's actually something that we're going to talk about with the next panelist. But first of all, again, thank you, and very interesting to hear also your perspective and also to see what we can expect from Italy. And I thought it was very inspiring, and also I very much recall the remark that you made, is that Italy always recovers very quickly, and I think that should be the spirit. And probably the European Championship for football will help, to keep the good spirits up in the coming periods. Yes, so we will now move on to the next speaker, Ladea Godina Kozir. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. You are the director of the Circular Change and also the chair of the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. And I think it would be really interesting to hear from you how progress is made with regard to this issue, the issue of the circular economy in several EU member states. Who are the key stakeholders, and how is the EU helping them to catalyze the transition to a circular economy?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I've got inspired through the speeches that we have heard and through this dialogue, and I will refer to that later on, because we can see from events like that how things are interconnected and how important it is that we are enabling the space for the dialogue where we can hear each other and act and react based on that. So here I'm moving now, yes, to the European Circular Economy Platform as something unique, I would say. Why? Because in 2017, it was established by the European Commission on one side, and on the other, the European Economic and Social Committee. So saying that, you can see that this is a true partnership trying to bridge top-down and bottom-up approach. And as we have heard today very often, this whole recovery is not possible without true collaboration. It is very easy to talk about that, even to write documents on that, but when it comes to practice, then we still lack, I wouldn't say the knowledge, but somehow the expertise on that collaboration can bring win-win results. And this is what we are encouraging also with the platform, and within the coordination group, we have 24 members. These are different organizations, associations, think tanks, businesses, trade unions, research. It has been mentioned how important it is really to invest into the creativity and innovation. So within this coordination group, we are really nourishing the dialogue. And also what was nicely said, it is not the whole green recovery and of course, Green Deal and addressing climate crisis, as well as Janis Potocnek nicely said, the other part of the same coin, that is the health crisis. What we need here is encouragement. It is not that we are sacrificing things and that we are going back somewhere. No, on the contrary, we have to reinvent the whole wheel. And here we as different stakeholders are doing exactly that. Learning all the time, exploring, understanding that we don't have the answers, but we do have each other, and in different formats like online conversations, the platform, the virtual one, events, then we have European Circular Economy talks. All that is offering us the opportunity really to bring the voice from the ground to those who are decision makers on the top, and then collaborate. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I think that's really good to learn about. How is your own country, Slovenia, progressing towards the circular economy? Is it learning from experience in other EU member states, or is it rather setting the example? So how are you picking up in Slovenia on this issue?
Slovenia is the country, the only country with love in its name. And I sincerely hope that out of this love, we will manage also to do something beautiful for the prosperity and for the future during this time of the presidency and further on. What I would like to stress here is one thing that has been mentioned today. I just captured the opening remarks from our Minister Logar, who used the data, and he said that 63% of Slovenians are ready to participate in the future of EU. I think it's very important because as far as I know, in the European Barometer survey, it was on the level of Europe, like 92% of citizens willing or feeling that they can contribute to the future of Europe. And I would start here when addressing Slovenia. So the power of citizens and our proactive approach. We have seen now in the recent time, in the last year, during also the COVID crisis and everything, that there is this will and this power in the hands of the people, and that we are willing and ready for a change. So this is a very, very important capital, human capital that we have. On the other hand, we have a lot, of course, we are part of Europe. So therefore, European Green Deal, Circular Economy Action Plan, now Green Recovery and New Bauhaus and all the rest, everything is addressing us as well as other European citizens. And we also have the National Circular Economy Roadmap that we co-created together also with Janis Potocnek already back in 2017. But since then, what we see is, again, the lack of collaboration. Somehow, a lot of initiatives and good practices on the side of the business sector, a lot of EU projects running but not being coordinated, a lot of civil society initiatives, a lot of startups. So it is very fragmented, but we are lacking, despite the fact that we are 2 million people altogether, even not one city, really the country that you can manage. despite that fact, we don't have this collaborative spirit and skills. And here I'm very much promoting recently also the term that Jacqueline Kramer, you know her probably, she is a previous former Dutch Minister of Environment as well, and now in the Amsterdam board. So Professor Kramer is promoting network governance. And we are now within our European Circular Economy platform also leading the group. I'm the chair of that one on network governance. Why? Because if we do not know how to orchestrate all these different stakeholders and really to be those transition brokers that can mediate and somehow orchestrate the processes as well as communicate with the public governance, the change cannot happen. And this is what we are facing, I would say, now in Slovenia. And hopefully through this period of the presidency, we will find some touch points where we can show that we are capable to contribute to this very demanding and complex transformation.
Mm-hmm. All right, yeah, thanks. So yeah, to see really what players can also in a network learn from each other, how they can inspire each other, how they can work together to make truly sustainable value change, yeah, for the circular economy. That's of course all very essential. You were already mentioning the new European Bauhaus initiative, and also Professor Borghese was talking about new ways of innovation and design. And this Bauhaus initiative is also part of the EU's recovery agenda. The original Bauhaus represented a huge innovation in European architecture, yeah, also let's say a new era. How will the new Bauhaus project, or how can it be transformative, and what is needed to truly build back better? Is now the slogan that we hear most of.
Yeah, so first I would say that I'm not very much in favor of the slogan "build back better," because I don't believe in building back, but in reshaping and rediscovering how we can build this whole system, because it is about systemic approach, what Janis is always preaching about, but also showing by example. So it is what is needed is this creativity and innovation. We have heard that. And I am very pleased that we have now this new Bauhaus. Why? Because when I started my journey, it was so nicely said before, the journey is more important actually than the final destination. So 6 years ago, because my background is in creative industries, I was promoting very much this connection between circular economy and creative industries. And it was a little bit weird back then, because they said, okay, but what does it have to do with economy? Why should we integrate all those creative forces to co-create solutions that are economically viable? And now we see that without this collaboration with innovative and creative spirits, we cannot present the lifestyle that we as citizens would go for. So it is also about that, once I will repeat again, it is not about sacrifice, it is about co-creating the lifestyle that is enabling us to live a good life. On the other hand, to have aesthetics around us, because we are visual beings as well, and we need nice things, and we deserve nice things, but does not mean that we have to produce it in the same way or use it and consume it in the same way as we did. So here now we need, and we have this opportunity really to integrate the artists as well as architects, so everyone who can contribute to this journey. And with new Bauhaus, it is giving a kind of, I would say, fresh flavor to everything what we are co-creating. And here I will refer to Janis, because he said that through this COVID crisis, we rediscovered in a way that we are part of nature. But what else I see that we rediscovered? That we have, of course, to protect the nature, to protect the economy, but also to protect the humanity. Because we are human beings, and without this shared vision, shared values, without the persistence in these challenging times, without trust and transparency, as well as without celebration of the small steps and achievements, this journey cannot lead to a happy end. So therefore, I'm very much in favor of all that, what we have put it on the table here, and I strongly believe in our joint vision and collaboration on this, sometimes very bumpy road.
Right, thank you so much. And I think that's also very inspiring and also very much true that sometimes with all the innovations and the creativity, you arrive at different solutions that you've not really thought of before. And I think in the COVID pandemic, we also saw a lot of examples of that. I always use the example of that we in 2016 thought we should set up these online meetings with people like you to avoid all these travel costs that people have to spend on coming to meetings and to discuss issues. And that at that time we wanted to do that through Skype, and our IT company that helps the Clingendael Institute told us that in reality that's not yet possible. And then if you see, you know, now in 2021, how quickly this has all evolved and how quickly new ways of working has come up. Just a small example, but it's something that always crossed my mind. But thank you so much for your contribution. It's really also about turning into reality this idea that you don't just buy things and throw them away or use them, but you really think about how it integrates and can be functional in a systemic way. I wanted to ask actually, because I know that Dr. Potocnek has to leave us in a few minutes. I wanted to ask the panelists if they wanted to come in and also respond to each other's contributions, but and then I will afterwards go to the question posed by Jim Close. But first I wanted to ask Dr. Potocnek if you would like to come in and say something on what you've just heard by Ms. Godina Gosir or by the other two speakers.
Thank you, Louise. Indeed, very quickly, because I have to leave. I always used to say when I was still a commissioner that killing the industry with kindness, it's not the right way to go. So what industry needs, it's clarity, predictability, direction. They need a clear path, which is, of course, by the public services provided on the basis of public interests. And they are extremely powerful when it comes to innovation, when it comes to new ideas and activities. And Simona, I think, clearly touched the thing that speed and scale are the core problem of are we well on track meeting the targets and the vision which we have created. And that's exactly where Commission and Mauro very clearly explained that with Fit to 55, it's the real test with which we will show how seriously we are actually, how serious we are in meeting the really clear vision which was adopted by the Commission and also by the member states. Simone also mentioned that in the context of the border and trade that Europe might need to enter into the troubled waters and that might be challenging. And my comment would be that entering the troubled waters, it's a good reason for saving life or lives. And sometimes you are even rewarded later on with a medal for courage. So I think it's circular economy indeed. It's too many times connected to the waste story. And what I'm really trying to push is that we start thinking how to rebase the incentives which we are giving to the producer. Something which is for them today a profit should become for them a cost. For example, you have very good example in Netherlands in the Schiphol where Philips is offering the service of providing the light instead of selling the light bulbs. When it was selling the light bulbs, of course, the interest of Philips was providing as many light bulbs as possible when they are selling the light is just the opposite. So creating that kind of incentives, it's actually making life of consumer easier, but providing him with the same commodity and even better quality of life than before. So we always have to search for that kind of activities, and I think in circular economy there is a lot of that. And just to end with something which I normally end my presentations, it's very linked to what you said at the end, Ladeya, about putting humans in the center, and I have actually ended very much in the same way. Since I'm sitting here in Belgium, the best advice which could be given is exactly by the famous Belgian detective Hercule Poirot, when he was once asked why he's speaking about himself always in the third person. His reply was, if somebody is so intelligent like I am, it's always good to establish a healthy distance to himself. So that's exactly what the humanity needs to do. We need to establish a healthy distance to ourselves. And if we are really so intelligent, and we have the responsibility also towards others with whom we are sharing this beautiful planet. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Potocnek, and thank you for being with us, and good luck with the presentation on the rare earths. Very
all the best to everybody.
Well.
It was really great being with you, and thank you. I'm happy to have to leave and not listen to the others, but such is life, as Mauro knows best. Take care.
Yeah, no,
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Bye.
I actually wanted to go to Mauro Petriccione to hear, because you were the first speaker and you've listened to the contributions of the others, if you have something to remark. And I also wanted to bring in the question posed by Jim Close. Maybe he can even be brought in. I'm not sure if that's technically possible. Jim Close, the director of TEPSA, he was asking in the chat, I think this has to do with the effort sharing. I always forget if it's a regulation or a directive. I guess it's a regulation. If EU unanimity will continue when we get to the burden sharing stage. And I think that's a very interesting question from somebody, I think, who has worked for a long time on the at the highest levels at the legal dimension of the EU. Mauro, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Louise. Well, let me say three things, one of which will try to answer Jim's question. But I mean, first, a general point that comes from something you said, and then which also runs as a thread in what we heard from Janis. You said, you know, the climate is like the pandemic crisis in slow motion. It's not that slow, you know. It's happening. Look at what's happening in the US right now. Temperature 10 degrees higher than the seasonal average. If you look at the death rate in some of our member states in summer of elderly people, I mean, it's frightening. So, and this is getting worse very, very quickly. I think, but the climate change poses a very peculiar challenge, because it is at the same time urgent and paced. And you know, Janis was asking repeatedly, underlying even in his last intervention, underline the relation between the goal and how to get there and the credibility. If you work around the European Union, whether you work for a union institution or in member states, wherever, there are two features that have made us successful in the past. Patience to accept the fact that our pace is always slower than it ought to be, and the stamina to keep going for the goal in spite of the frustration of this slow. Now, climate change is challenging that. We can no longer afford to say, well, okay, we've almost done it, we'll do better next time, let's move on. Climate change is giving us a very hard deadline. When I talked about a model, that model implies our objective of 2050 net zero, because if we don't get to net zero by 2050, and if we're not seen getting there, we will not have the other major economies getting there. The world will not be climate neutral by during the second half of the century, and we will not stop climate change. And let's make no mistake, stopping climate change at 1.5 degrees, it's horrible. It's a lot worse than we have today. Our chances of stopping the world at 1.5 degrees are substantial, but not extremely high. So this is a tough one. And this is the first time that we have this very hard deadline. Okay, 30 years away, but 30 years when you're talking about investment cycles are not very long. And we cannot afford to go on until we reach the target. We have to start working both bottom up and top down. And this is a big challenge. I think it's a real challenge, but it also offers the huge opportunity that when you have an objective, when you know where you want to go, and you start working backwards, how do you get there, which is what we've done from net zero 2050 to our 2030 objectives good enough? Answer, no. It changes completely the way you operate. And you've seen that in organizations now. You've seen that business very quickly, public organizations. And the next step is you need to see that in public life, in cities, in local administration, and in our private lives. We have to start thinking, what's my change? What do I do which is different to fit with this objective? So I think it's something that we're not used to, and it's proving complex to adapt, but it's also proving very rewarding in terms of how much concrete our short-term action becomes if you know where you want to get. Second point concerns something that Simona said about the equivalent ambition of other countries and the relation with CBAM. But not only that's spot on, but I would like to recall something that people tend to forget. Climate-related market instruments are not there to generate money. They're not there for people to pay the carbon price. They are there for people to find ways to avoid paying the carbon price. It's not like a tax, where you have to pay, you calculate what you pay, and you can afford it, you can't afford it, you carry on, you change your business. No, the system is designed to persuade people that they have to do something radical to avoid it. So at the end of the day, we don't want our trade partners to pay the border measure. We want them to actually change their policies and demonstrate that they are entitled to avoiding paying those border measures. That's the objective. And I think we're getting an unusually constructive response. Is it sufficient? Is it solid enough? Will it happen? The level of uncertainty is huge. But when we proposed net zero in 2050 at the end of 2018, the green community was applauding. The rest of the world looked at us as if we were stark raving mad. In the autumn of 2020, in the midst of a major crisis, the Secretary General of the United Nations could afford to talk about a net zero coalition. That's the scale of the change that we are beginning to prompt, and that's one of the big values of having this European project. My last point concerning Jim's question, which is one of the pointed questions that I mentioned earlier, we need to answer. The honest answer is I don't know. Do I think that we will keep that unanimity? I think so, because we're not only sharing burdens, we're sharing opportunities. we're sharing resources. I have to confess that when we saw the debate on the multi-annual financial framework up to February of 2020, we were getting a little scared. Because we saw a deterioration of the notion of European solidarity, a very serious deterioration, sometimes for very understandable reasons. You know, solidarity works both ways. I help you because you're in need, but I'm not here to provide charity. Solidarity isn't charity. So I help you get up. What do you do when you're up? The pandemic and the Next Generation EU changed completely that logic. It's a logic of mutual help. I help you, you do something to demonstrate that you are going to use that help wisely. We are borrowing from the future, we're giving back to the future. Now, I'm not so naive that I think that, you know, this is the end of it. 34 years in the Commission dispose of any trace of naivete one may have had at the beginning. But it shows that it is possible to rebuild solidarity around a project. And that project happens to be not only get out of the pandemic, rebuild our economy, it is build a green and digital economy for the 21st century. So it is possible. It's possible on a very large scale. It is possible to aggregate consensus around it. It doesn't happen again because it has happened once. So that is as usual, it will always be an uphill road. On the other hand, I would just point to the fact that I would close on this. Every time we have a European Council, there is a raft of discussion about how divisive the things are and how divided member states are. And every time there is, but country X complain about Y, and there was really no consensus. Then you look at the conclusion the European Council reaches every time, and you see the slope going up in terms of objective decisions, ambition. Yes, it's not an even road, it's bumpy. But so far so good, I would say. So I continue to be optimistic. I also continue to be realistic that the consensus we're building has to be nurtured every day. It's fragile, and it requires a lot of patience and stamina.
All right, thank you so much. I think this is really for a TEPSA conference exactly the type of insights that we are interested in and to learn about and to think about and improve our understanding. And by the way, with regard to solidarity, I think for my own country, the Netherlands, the effort sharing is also going to be difficult because with the current policies in place, the Netherlands expected only to arrive at 43% emission reductions in 2030, and if we would have to go deep down, it's also not going to be an easy undertaking. But then if transport and the built environment are going to be included in the ETS, it might become more easy or more difficult. And I guess all the countries in Europe are going to look at this Fit for 55 package from that perspective. They're all going to see what's in it for me, how is my target compared to the target of other countries, what does it do, what is the impact assessment saying about increases of electricity prices, and so on and so forth. So that's going to be really fascinating. We're actually almost at the end of the time of this session. So I just wanted to give the opportunity to Simona and Ladea also to give 1 minute perhaps reflection on what you've heard other speakers say and what you take out of this session. Please, Simona, maybe Professor Borghese, you first.
Thank you. It was a really inspiring conversation. So there are many things, but in 1 minute, I will just echo one aspect that Mauro said. And I would like to go back on the CBAM and the EU ETS consideration. You know, I've been working on the ETS for quite some time now, so it looks like a family member in my life. But to be honest, as Mauro was saying, this is something we might want to get rid of in the future. It's not something that is there to for people to pay, but we want ideally to not use carbon markets in the future. Probably this would mean that we manage to shift to a decarbonized, clean technology in the future. And also in parallel to the CBAM, so that's a measure that we would like not to see implemented. And again, talking about similarities between EU ETS and CBAM, the expectations might really play a key role. If you look at the carbon price on the EU ETS, the growth that we have experienced came after the reform of the ETS, which changed the expectations of the market operators. So this might happen with the CBAM as well. But again, it's a bumpy road, we know, even because this goes beyond the difficulties within Europe. It's also about the relationship with the others. But again, as I said, I'm confident because I see things growing and also cooperation growing, and I'm optimistic about the future.
Thank you so much. And then Ms. Godinez Kosir, would you like to come in? The final reflection.
I will try to wrap it up. Yes, what are my takes away? So absolutely, we all agree and we realize that we are in a very historical moment right now. For our generation, it has never been like that. And for the coming generations, hopefully, they will have the future. And it is based on the decisions we are taking right now and right here. And what we have also realized through this discussion is that it is for Europe as such, this is also a kind of a test of our determination. We have all these documents and agreements and everything, but what is actually happening on the ground? Are we now in the position and are we really willing and capable to implement this change on the ground? So connecting all the stakeholders and being all the time in the process of these road mappings and implementation and everything, I see that it is really important to nourish this space, as I mentioned already, for the dialogue. And as well as to, yes, to be persistent. And on the other hand, to not to forget that everything is changing, but on the other hand, our basic values are the same as they used to be. And they're the same no matter where on this part of the world we are. We as humans, we want to belong. We want to live our purpose. We deserve good lives and love and all that. So therefore, this gap between big words and at the end on the solutions that we are co-creating on the ground has to diminish a little bit with the conversation and with inclusiveness. Because now there is no more time just to say, okay, we will go in this direction and that's the right. We see that it is the bumpy road. And on this bumpy road, we need everyone. And by saying that we are not going to leave anyone behind, and this is our promise here in Europe, it means that also within this process, we are embarking everyone and that we are capable and willing to listen to different opinions, solutions, to try and maybe fail, but to move forward together. So I think it's really important for us, particularly here in Europe, regarding this solidarity as well. I like this, this remark very much. You cannot prescribe solidarity. It comes from the heart and it's based on our decisions. And it's okay that it is not a charity and it has to be win-win. But without these dialogues, without this collaboration, then even the solutions cannot be created. So for the future, I think that really to bring this, how to say, this European spirit that is somehow lost in translation, I guess now, really forward, and to understand how vulnerable we are and interdependent and interconnected, then I have hope. Otherwise, if we start thinking I can do it by myself, then the story is over. Thank you.
Right, thanks. Well, there's one thing I can do by myself, which is thank you all for your excellent, outstanding contributions. Thank you for the audience for staying with us all the time. And I hope you found it also as interesting as I did. I really learned a great deal. And I think also there were very many elements that were really relevant for, let's say, the TEPSA focus, also on European integration and the lessons we can learn from the Grand Project of today. Yeah, I thank you so much for being open with sharing your views with us and with the viewers. And I hope to meet you again, and perhaps in real life, although I don't want to go into planes so much anymore. Also that we are looking back in a year's time and see how the Fit for 55 package really traveled far, and even better if we look back in 10 years' time, how we managed to transform the economy to an even greater extent. The energy transition is already put in motion, but this will become the catalyzer, I hope. Thank you, and goodbye for now.